What's up everybody, it's Joe here with Joseph Blake Photography, and in today's video we're going to be talking about new information that we have about the Mavic 4, which we expect to be released very soon. Hey everybody, I'm Joe. This is my channel, Joseph Blake Photography, where we talk about tech and news and gear and reviews, and sometimes we go out on adventures. And so if you're a content creator here on YouTube or really anywhere else in the social media space, or if you're creating for clients and paid gigs, or if you're just making stuff for your friends and family, the tools that we use and the techniques that we use for things like that, we talk about on this channel. If that's the type of thing that you're into, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if at the end of the video you think I've done a good job, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. Socials all down below, find me there. I am an adventure photographer as well as a portrait photographer here in Las Vegas, Nevada. So if you're looking for that on your next trip to Vegas, go ahead and find my site down below. But let's jump into talking about this drone and the new information that we have. So a number of sources, including the enigmatic Jasper Ellens or X27 on X or Twitter, have been closely following FCC filings from DJI, and well, they came up with a doozy. The Mavic 4 has officially gone through FCC submission, which means that it is pretty close to announcement. And to be quite honest, considering the fact that we are potentially close to a DJI drone ban, with DJI being added to the FCC entities list soon, maybe we'll see if Congress can get their act together, if that's something that they want to do or if they should do, or if Skydio has paid them enough to do it. We shall see, but likely going to happen at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, if it does happen, which means DJI is probably going to try to get this thing out the door as quick as possible. So even though the FCC filings don't specifically call them the Mavic 4 Pro and the Mavic 4 Cinema, well, we can pretty much figure it out. There are two drones that have been submitted. They are identical in many ways, especially when it comes to the battery sizes. These drones are being nicknamed JV31 and JV32. And before anybody says, oh, this could be the Air 3S, it's not. These batteries are gigantic. So let's start with that. The Mavic 3, both the Pro and the Cine, had a 5,000 milliamp 74 watt hour battery. And with that, we got hover time of about 43 minutes and flight time of about 37 minutes. And with that 5,000 milliamp battery and 74 watt hours, they were able to charge in about 70 minutes if connected to the external charger, and about 90 minutes if connected directly via USB-C charging cable. So what are we going to see on the Mavic 4 Pro and Mavic 4 Cinema? Well, the FCC filings indicate that this battery is going to be 6,400 milliamps and 99 watt hours. Now, 99 watt hours, interestingly enough, is the highest amount that you can actually put in a consumer piece of electronics and still be able to fly with it. So basically, they've maxed out the size that they can potentially make this battery and still have it be something that you can, and I don't mean fly in the air, I mean that you can board a plane with it in your luggage or in your carry-on. That's just the law. So with a 30% increase in overall power, we are definitely going to see longer flight times, probably something in the 45 to 50 minute flight time, and potentially up to 55 or 60 minutes of hover time. Now, obviously, some of that power is going to be devoted to what I'm sure are going to be new processing and camera sensors that are going to demand probably a considerable amount of power, but we can also assume that additional efficiencies have been put into the motors, which will make them more capable and stretch this battery out a little bit longer. Unless your batteries are like mine, which you left on the charger too long and they are now spicy pillows that you have had to get rid of. And again, we do know for sure that this is a drone submission because of the diagram that DJI did submit to the FCC for approval. One other thing that we can say almost for certain is that the Mavic 3, which had the O3 Plus or OcuSync 3 Plus transmission up to 15 kilometers, will be upgraded to the O4 and will be getting at least 20 kilometers of 1080p 30, potentially 1080p 60, outdoors when unobstructed and no interference in the middle of nowhere where no one lives and no one owns a microwave. Next, I want to talk about obstacle avoidance, and we're going to get to the cameras in just a minute, but there are no front sensors on this bad boy. It has what look to be 6 180-degree fisheye lens sensors on the top and maybe also on the bottom. Now, the obstacle avoidance on the Mavic 3 was the APAS 5.0, and it had 8 wide-angle sensors to avoid collision. And for the Mavic 4, we now officially at least know that there's going to be 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom. There will probably be at least 1 or 2 more, but that instead of being quote-unquote wide angle, these look to be 180-degree full field of view cameras, and they have to be in order to get that forward sensing capability. It's also possible that the 3 cameras on the front of the drone will also be used secondarily as a part of the obstacle avoidance system, but that is yet to be seen. So now, as content creators, let's get to what I think is probably the most important part, which is the camera bundle. Now, the Mavic 3 had 3 cameras, and all the images that we see of this camera module, this tennis ball sized camera module that looks like it's going to be jutting out from the front of the Mavic 4, looks to be very clearly like it's going to have 3 sensors. So let's go through the 3 on the Mavic 3, and let's talk about what we think we're going to see on the Mavic 4. Starting with the long telephoto, this is the 1/2 inch sensor. And for those who aren't aware, a 1/2 inch sensor or a 1/2 inch sensor is not actually 1/2 inch. It's considerably smaller than that. The diagonal measurement of a 1/2 inch sensor is actually about 8 millimeters, which is about 1/3 of an inch. And while it does have a 166 millimeter or a 7 times optical zoom lens attached to it, as well as the ability to do digital zooming, it also is only a 12 megapixel single bare sensor. A single bare sensor means that each photo site is designed to accept either red, green, or blue color, and it can measure the light. It measures the light, and it has a color filter in front of it that allows it to record green, red, or blue. And there's twice as many green photo sites as there are blue and red. And that's because the human eye can see green better than it can blue and red. So that is a low resolution and small sensor. It's also configured with a 3.5 aperture, which means that it has the least amount of light gathering of any of the cameras on this drone. So for the Mavic 4, I'm going to expect them to upgrade that to at least the newer 48 megapixel quad bare sensor that they have, where instead of 1 blue and 1 red and 2 greens for each photo site, for each pixel, you'll get 4 times as many, which means that it can record just as much color information per photo site. But each of those pixels will actually have 4 pixels associated with it to collect light information. That should allow for sharper, higher resolution, and more dynamic range options from that sensor. I would also expect them to upgrade it to at least an f2.8 aperture. Now, moving to the 70 millimeter or medium telephoto. Now, this is the 3x optical, and this is a very popular sensor for DJI. They're using it in the Mavic 3, they're using it in the Air 2, and they're using it in the Mini 4 Pro. This is a 1/1.3 inch sensor with that 12 and 48 megapixel quad bare technology that we just talked about, meaning it can bring in more light. And before you come at me in the comments, I do know that that is a measurement of the ratio between the focal length and the size of the opening. So the longer the focal length, if you have the same size opening, technically the smaller the aperture. But the bigger the aperture, the more light you can bring in. So again, this is a 70 millimeter equivalent or 3x zoom lens, and it's been very popular for DJI. But even though it's a 1/1.3 inch sensor, it's not actually 1/1.3 inches. That fraction doesn't really make any sense. The diagonal of a 1/1.3 type sensor is actually about 12 millimeters or a little less than half an inch. Now, it's considerably better than a sensor called a half-inch sensor, as it is a bigger sensor, but it's not actually 1/1.3 inches. Now, I would love to see them upgrade this to a 1-inch sensor, but I honestly don't believe that we're going to do that. I think that they'll take the long tele and the medium tele and bring them up to the same level, meaning both of them will be 48 megapixels, 1/1.3 inch sensors, and f2.8 apertures. If anything, the medium telephoto might get a variable aperture, but I don't think it'll be anything smaller than an f2.8. I do think that they will improve the sensor, but I think on paper, we won't see a lot of that. Much of that will be seen in demos and in the way in which the processor on this drone actually utilizes the information coming off the sensor. Better color, better dynamic range, better low light performance, improved noise management. Now, last but not least, we get to the big boy, the 24 millimeter sensor, the Hasselblad camera. In the Mavic 3 Pro and Mavic 3 Cine, this is a 24mm equivalent 20 megapixel variable aperture lens that is a 4/3 CMOS sensor. So what does 4/3 mean? Well, it doesn't mean 4/3 of an inch or 1 1/3 inches. A 4/3 sensor, or an MFT sensor, or a micro 4/3 sensor, as it's called in cameras, is a 17 by 13 millimeter surface area with a 21.6 millimeter diagonal. 21.6 millimeters is about 0.85 inches. In fact, you don't actually cross the 1 inch measurement mark until you get into APS-C sensors, which for DJI you're not going to find except on the Zenmuse X7, or the full frame, which is about 1.5 inches that you find on the new Inspire 3. The Mavic 2 Pro was marketed as having a Hasselblad 1-inch sensor, but that sensor was a little over 15 millimeters or 0.6 inches diagonal. So they already have a 4/3 sensor in the Mavic 3. And this is a 20 megapixel sensor, which was the same resolution out of the Mavic 2. But by making that sensor larger, they were able to increase the quality that came out of each of those photo sites. Lower noise, better low light potential, better color, better dynamic range. I do not think that we will see an increase in sensor size, but I do believe that we will see an increase in resolution, potentially to 24 or 30 megapixels. I still believe that it will be a micro 4/3 or a 4/3 sensor, and I think it'll still be a 24mm equivalent lens with a 2.8 to f11 aperture, although they may improve that to an f1.7. Lastly, we've been seeing more and more on DJI products the inclusion of onboard memory. Now, in a previous video where I talked about the Mavic 4, I said that I really hoped that they would include some onboard memory, but not charge $3,000 for the drone. Now, I understand the need to be able to shoot in ProRes 422 HQ, and I know that that takes fast memory to write, and you're probably not going to be able to put that into the drone with a micro SD card slot. And a terabyte of memory still isn't cheap. But if we end up with a 6K main sensor, and with that bump in resolution, I think we're going to end up seeing a 6K video mode. And with new processors, I think we'll see that up to 60 FPS, and I think we'll end up seeing 4K at 120. But that may only be on this sensor. So when it comes to onboard storage, I'm going to expect to see at least 64 and potentially 128 gigabytes of onboard storage for the Pro model, and 1 to 4 terabytes of onboard storage for the Cinema model. I think that's a step in the next direction, and with iterative improvements in battery size, updates to the telephoto cameras, an improvement in resolution from the Hasselblad camera, combined with new processors to allow for higher bit rates, better low light performance, better machine algorithms to reduce noise in low light environments, and dynamic scenes, and higher dynamic range in general across the pipeline. My last thought, and my last hope, honestly, is that DJI releases this at a better price. With the expectation of an Air 3S coming soon with a 1-inch sensor, and the Mini 4 Pro with that 1.13 sensor, I 100% expect people to pay more for a better drone. But I think the distance, the spread of cost has been a little excessive, especially in the Mavic 3 line. I'd love to see a drone and remote at $19.99, a Fly More combo at $24.99, and the Cine model starting at $29.99. Because personally, I think that the Mavic 3 Cine Fly More combo at $4,800 is just a non-starter. Anyway, those are my thoughts. That's the information that we have and the information that I'm hoping that we see soon. But I'd love for you to tell me down in the comments what you're flying and what you're interested in seeing out of this drone and whether or not it's going to be an upgrade for you. I bought the Mavic Pro after I had the Spark. I bought the Mavic 2 Pro, and honestly, that 1-inch sensor has done me very well. Just not those spicy pillow batteries. As always, thank you for watching. If this is the kind of content that you're into, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you thought that this information was beneficial for you, please go ahead and hit the like button. If you're interested in finding me elsewhere, go ahead and find my social media links down below. And if you're interested in my sensor conversations, I posted a video about sensor sizes that you can find right up here. And you can also find my review of the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max and their new cameras right here. If you want to subscribe, go ahead and click this one right here. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.